What if everything you thought you knew about history was just the tip of the iceberg? Picture this: a crumbling parchment, buried for centuries, suddenly unearthed in a forgotten tomb, its words contradicting the official records we've trusted for generations. Or an artifact so bizarre, so out of place, that it forces historians to rewrite entire chapters of the past. These aren't scenes from a fantasy novel. They're real discoveries that prove history is far more mysterious, far more deliberately hidden than we've ever been led to believe. For centuries, those in power have shaped the stories we accept as truth, editing, erasing, and even fabricating events to suit their agendas. But secrets, no matter how well buried, have a way of resurfacing. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on 30 of the most shocking historical secrets ever concealed. These aren't just minor footnotes or debated theories. These are earth-shattering revelations, proof of lost civilizations, suppressed inventions, and covert operations so controversial they've been locked away in vaults, burned from records, or whispered about only in the shadows. Think about the history books you grew up with. How much of that was carefully curated to keep us in the dark? What if I told you that some of the most pivotal moments in human history were staged, that some of our greatest heroes weren't who they claimed to be, and that entire empires rose and fell because of lies we're only now beginning to uncover? This video is your key to those hidden truths. We're diving deep into archives, decoding cryptic manuscripts, and piecing together evidence that changes everything. By the end, you'll see the past and perhaps even the present in a whole new light, so settle in. What you're about to discover might just rewrite history as you know it. Deep beneath the bustling streets of modern Moscow, a centuries-old mystery waits, one that could rewrite our understanding of ancient knowledge. The lost library of Ivan the Terrible isn't just some dusty collection of forgotten books. This legendary underground vault, whispered about in hushed tones for generations, is said to hold priceless treasures, sacred Slavic manuscripts, esoteric texts filled with forbidden wisdom, and even the long-lost scrolls of the original library of Alexandria. How did these priceless artifacts end up hidden below Russia's capital? The answer lies with Ivan himself, the infamous Tsar whose reign was as brutal as it was obsessive. Known as Ivan the Terrible for his ruthless rule in the 1500s, the Tsar harbored a secret passion far darker than his public image suggested. He wasn't just a conqueror or a tyrant. He was a man consumed by the occult, collecting rare manuscripts and magical treatises from across Europe and Asia. Some historians believe he amassed an unparalleled trove of knowledge, including ancient Greek and Roman texts thought to have burned in Alexandria centuries earlier. But instead of sharing this wisdom, Ivan reportedly hid it away in a labyrinth of secret chambers beneath the Kremlin, a library so vast its existence has been debated for over 400 years. Could such a place really exist? Modern explorers certainly think so. Over the years, multiple excavation attempts have been made to uncover the library, from Soviet-era digs to high-tech scans of underground tunnels. In the 1960s, archaeologists even claimed to have stumbled upon a hidden chamber near Red Square, only for the Soviet government to abruptly shut down their work. Strange, isn't it? Why would a modern power be so eager to silence the search for ancient books? Some theorists argue that certain secrets, whether they contain lost history, advanced knowledge, or even dangerous esoteric truths, are still considered too volatile to reveal. But here's where the mystery deepens. In 2014, a team of researchers using ground-penetrating radar detected what appeared to be hollow spaces beneath a historic building in central Moscow, spaces that didn't match any known architectural plans. Could this finally be the breakthrough, or is the lost library just another tantalizing ghost from history, forever out of reach? One thing's for certain: if Ivan the Terrible's hidden trove is ever found, it wouldn't just be a discovery, it would be a revolution. Imagine uncovering the lost wisdom of Alexandria, preserved underground for centuries, waiting for the right moment to shake the foundations of what we think we know. For over a century, the Voynich Manuscript has stood as history's most impenetrable puzzle. A handwritten medieval book filled with bizarre botanical illustrations, celestial charts, and an utterly indecipherable script that has defied every codebreaker, linguist, and artificial intelligence system thrown at it. Conventional theories claim it's the work of Renaissance alchemists, or perhaps even extraterrestrial visitors, given its otherworldly visuals. But what if the truth is far more human and far more deceptive? Emerging research now points to a shocking possibility that this so-called book no one can read was actually the brainchild of Edward Kelly, a notorious Elizabethan-era con artist and spy. Kelly, best known as the disreputable sidekick of occultist John Dee, had a knack for forgery and theatrical deception. Court records describe him fabricating angelic languages during seances to impress wealthy patrons, a skill that would be eerily useful for crafting a fake ancient manuscript. Recent forensic handwriting analysis reveals striking similarities between the Voynich's script and authenticated samples of Kelly's personal notebooks. Even more damning, carbon dating places the manuscript's vellum squarely in Kelly's lifetime, while spectral imaging shows signs of deliberate staining to make the pages appear centuries older than they really were. The plot thickens when you consider who stood to profit from such an elaborate hoax. Kelly frequently traveled through royal courts where rare, mysterious manuscripts fetched astronomical prices from collectors obsessed with the occult. Creating an unreadable book would have been the ultimate sales pitch. An artifact so baffling, its very indecipherability became proof of its value. Modern linguists have even identified patterns in the Voynich's nonsense words that match known bluffing techniques used by 16th century grifters. Repetitive syllable structures, pseudo-Latin endings, and carefully balanced character distributions designed to mimic real language without containing any actual meaning. Yet the most compelling evidence lies in the manuscript's infamous herbal section. While its plants seem fantastical, botanists recently matched several illustrations to real species, but with a twist. These weren't medieval European herbs, they were New World specimens like sunflowers and chili peppers, plants that wouldn't have been known in Europe until after Columbus's voyages. Kelly, who had ties to explorers and smugglers, would have had access to these exotic species decades before they became common knowledge. The implications are staggering. Not only was this likely an elaborate scam, but it may also be one of history's first recorded cases of fake news, designed to exploit humanity's endless fascination with the unexplained. So why does this matter today? Because the Voynich manuscript isn't just a quirky relic, it's a mirror. Its enduring mystery reveals how easily we mistake complexity for profundity, how willing we are to believe in hidden truths simply because they're well hidden. Whether crafted by Kelly or another cunning mind, the manuscript reminds us that history's greatest secrets aren't always ancient. Sometimes they're carefully staged illusions, waiting for the right moment to whisper a very modern lesson. The most powerful lies aren't those that deceive, but those we desperately want to believe. Hidden beneath the sands of modern-day Iraq lies an artifact so baffling, it seems to defy the very timeline of human innovation. The Baghdad Battery, a simple clay jar, a copper cylinder, and an iron rod has long been touted as proof that ancient civilizations harnessed electricity 2,000 years before Benjamin Franklin's famous kite experiment. But what if this widely accepted ancient battery theory is just the surface of a far stranger truth? Recent translations of cuneiform tablets from Persia's Parthian Empire reveal something startling. These texts describe temple rituals where golden idols were brought to life through a process that caused their surfaces to shimmer unnaturally. Scholars now believe this could refer to electroplating, a technique where a thin layer of gold is deposited onto metal using an electrical current. The Baghdad Battery's design, when filled with vinegar or grape juice as an electrolyte, produces just enough voltage to achieve this effect. Imagine the awe of worshippers witnessing statues seemingly glowing with divine energy, their faces gilded not by craftsmen's tools but by what would have appeared as magic. Yet there's another, even more intriguing possibility. Persian medical texts from the same era detail treatments for pain and paralysis using metal rods that bite like scorpions, with patients reporting tingling sensations. Sound familiar? The Baghdad Battery's output around 1 volt matches the voltage used in modern electrotherapy devices to stimulate nerves and muscles. Could these jars have been early medical tools, repurposed by physicians who stumbled upon electricity's healing properties centuries before science understood how it worked? The most compelling evidence comes from the artifact's context. Unlike other ancient batteries found in isolation, the Baghdad discovery included multiple jars stacked together, suggesting they were meant to be used in series to increase voltage. Even more telling, residue analysis detected traces of grape juice and vinegar inside, both known conductors in antiquity. But here's the twist: these substances were also sacred in Zoroastrian rituals, used to purify both body and spirit. This raises a haunting question. Were these devices neither purely practical nor wholly scientific, but something in between, sacred instruments bridging medicine, religion, and alchemy? So why does mainstream history cling to the ancient battery narrative? Perhaps because it's simpler to imagine our ancestors as proto-engineers rather than confronting a far more complex truth, that science and spirituality were once inseparable. The Baghdad Battery might not prove that the Parthians had modern electricity. Instead, it reveals something far more profound. A civilization that wielded mysterious forces we're only beginning to comprehend, blurring lines between technology and devotion in ways that still unsettle our neatly divided worldview. Beneath the iconic gaze of the Great Sphinx, a secret world lies waiting, one that could rewrite everything we know about ancient Egypt. In the early 1990s, ground-penetrating radar scans revealed something extraordinary. Hidden chambers beneath the Sphinx's massive pores, their purpose and content still shrouded in mystery. But when renowned archaeologist Zahi Hawass attempted to excavate these tunnels, his team was suddenly ordered to stop. Official reports cited concerns about structural instability, but whispers among researchers tell a different story, one involving forbidden knowledge and a potential link to Thoth's legendary Hall of Records. According to ancient texts, the Hall of Records was a vast underground library said to contain the lost wisdom of Atlantis, meticulously preserved by Thoth, the Egyptian god of wisdom. Some believe this hall isn't just myth, it's real, hidden beneath the sands of Giza, waiting to be uncovered. The radar scans only fueled these theories, showing symmetrical voids that resemble man-made chambers rather than natural formations. Even more intriguing, early seismic readings suggested the presence of metal objects deep within these spaces, objects that could match descriptions of the hall's legendary metallic tablets. So why the sudden halt to exploration? Officially, the Egyptian government has always maintained that preservation comes first, especially for such a fragile monument. But skeptics point to another possibility, that what lies beneath the Sphinx is so revolutionary, it could upend centuries of established history. Imagine uncovering texts that predate known Egyptian civilization by thousands of years, or worse, evidence that challenges the very origins of human knowledge. The implications would be seismic, not just for archaeology, but for religion, science, and even modern power structures. The most compelling clue might come from an unexpected source: Edgar Cayce, the famous 20th century psychic. During trance states, he described the Hall of Records in startling detail, claiming it would be rediscovered beneath the Sphinx's right paw. While mainstream scholars dismiss Cayce's visions as fantasy, it's hard to ignore the eerie alignment between his predictions and the radar findings decades later. Could there be a kernel of truth buried in these accounts? For now, the chambers remain sealed, their secrets locked away. But with advancing technology, from LiDAR scans to AI-assisted archaeology, the truth may finally be within reach. Whether these tunnels hold Thoth's ancient library, an untouched pharaonic treasure, or something far stranger, one thing is certain: the Sphinx hasn't given up all its secrets yet. And when it does, the world may need to rethink everything it thought it knew about the dawn of civilization. Buried beneath the Mediterranean waves for 2,000 years, the Antikythera Mechanism wasn't just an ancient artifact, it was a time bomb waiting to detangle our understanding of history. When divers first pulled this corroded bronze device from a Roman shipwreck in 1901, archaeologists assumed it was a simple astrolabe. But decades later, high-resolution CT scans revealed something that should have been impossible: a labyrinth of interlocking gears capable of predicting solar eclipses, planetary movements, and even the timing of the Olympic Games with precision that wouldn't be matched until the Renaissance. The real shock came when researchers reconstructed the mechanism's missing fragments. Hidden within its intricate clockwork were equations tracking the moon's elliptical orbit, a mathematical concept medieval Europe wouldn't grasp until Kepler in the 1600s. Even more startling, the device accounted for irregularities in lunar motion using a differential gear, a technology historians swore wasn't invented until the 19th century. These weren't lucky guesses. Whoever crafted this machine possessed a systematic understanding of celestial mechanics that clashed violently with the accepted timeline of scientific progress. Now, newly deciphered inscriptions on the mechanism's backplate have deepened the mystery. They reference eclipse predictions for specific dates, not just as astronomical events, but as omens tied to political upheavals. One highlighted eclipse aligns eerily with the assassination of Julius Caesar in 44 BC, while another matches the fall of Syracuse to Rome centuries earlier. This wasn't just a calculator, it was a propaganda tool wielded by elites who understood that controlling knowledge of the skies meant controlling the narrative of power on Earth. The implications are staggering. If Hellenistic astronomers could predict eclipses centuries in advance, why did this knowledge vanish for over a millennium? Some point to the burning of the Library of Alexandria as the turning point, but the truth may be more deliberate. The Antikythera Mechanism's sophistication suggests it wasn't unique, it was part of a tradition. Surviving texts from the period hint at other celestial engines, gifts exchanged between kings and scholars across the Mediterranean. Their disappearance coincides with Rome's rise, an empire more invested in military conquest than cosmic contemplation. What survives today might be a fragment of a much larger truth. That ancient science wasn't a linear march toward modernity, but a labyrinth of discoveries lost and rediscovered. The Antikythera Mechanism forces us to confront an uncomfortable possibility: that progress isn't inevitable, and that civilizations can forget as much as they learn. As researchers continue piecing together its secrets, one thing becomes clear: history's most dangerous secrets aren't always hidden in darkness. Sometimes they're right in front of us, waiting for the light to hit the gears at just the right angle. The sprawling desert of southern Peru holds more than just giant geoglyphs. It hides an ancient celestial code, written in lines that stretch for miles across the arid plains. While pop culture loves to paint the Nazca Lines as mysterious runways for extraterrestrial visitors, the truth is far more fascinating. These massive Earth drawings aren't random. They're a sophisticated astronomical calendar, meticulously aligned to solstices, equinoxes, and specific star clusters critical to the survival of the Paracas people. Take the famous spider glyph. For decades, its strange shape fueled wild theories until researchers noticed something startling. Its elongated legs don't just resemble an arachnid. They point precisely to where the constellation Orion rises during the December solstice, a time when the Paracas conducted vital water rituals. This wasn't arbitrary. Orion's appearance marked the arrival of seasonal rains, and the spider itself symbolized fertility in Paracas pottery. The lines weren't art, they were a survival manual etched into the earth. Even more compelling are the trapezoid-shaped trenches. Satellite imaging reveals these wide tracks align perfectly with the June solstice sunrise, the exact moment when Andean cultures celebrated Inti Raymi, the sun god's festival. But here's the twist: these alignments only make sense if you view them from specific high-altitude vantage points, suggesting the Nazca people constructed observation platforms on nearby hills. Recent drone surveys have uncovered stone markers at these elevated spots, their positions matching ancient star maps found on ritual drinking vessels. The real breakthrough came when archaeologists cross-referenced the lines with Paracas textile patterns. The same constellations depicted in the desert appear woven into burial shrouds, often alongside zigzag motifs representing flowing water. This wasn't just star worship, it was a complex hydrological system encoded in culture. When certain stars aligned, priests would interpret them as signals to activate networks of underground aqueducts called puquios, some of which still function today. So why does this matter? Because it transforms the Nazca Lines from enigmatic doodles into a profound statement about human ingenuity. Without telescopes or written language, the Paracas engineered a celestial irrigation manual that sustained their civilization for centuries. The next time someone jokes about alien runways, remember, the truth is even more extraordinary. These desert markings are a testament to how deeply our ancestors understood their world, not through superstition, but through precise, purposeful observation of the skies above them. Among the fragile Dead Sea Scrolls discovered in the mid-20th century, one artifact stands apart, not for its religious texts but for what it might unlock. The copper scroll isn't written on parchment. Its cryptic Hebrew and Greek letters are hammered into metal, listing 64 precise locations where unfathomable wealth from Jerusalem's Second Temple could still be buried. Unlike the other scrolls, this isn't a spiritual document. It's a treasure map etched in copper to endure millennia while hiding gold, silver, and sacred relics worth billions today. The directions are startlingly specific, yet maddeningly obscure. One passage describes silver bars buried under the fortress of the Valley of Achor beneath a large black stone. Another points to a cistern in the third terrace of Solomon's Canal. Modern researchers have matched some landmarks to known sites, like a ruined aqueduct near Qumran, but the treasures themselves remain elusive. Why? Because these aren't poetic metaphors. They're tactical instructions written for insiders who knew the terrain intimately. The scroll even provides exact measurements in talents, a unit of weight, suggesting the authors expected someone to retrieve these caches. Now here's where the mystery twists. While most Dead Sea Scrolls were likely hidden by the Essenes, a Jewish sect fleeing Roman persecution, the Copper Scroll's language hints at a different origin. The Greek phrases scattered throughout suggest Roman collaborators or temple priests may have orchestrated this operation. Some scholars argue the scroll records not just hidden wealth, but loot seized by Titus's army during the siege of Jerusalem in 70 AD, treasure hastily reburied during revolts or military defeats. Recent excavations have only deepened the intrigue. Ground-penetrating radar surveys in the Judean desert have revealed unnatural cavities matching the scroll's descriptions, yet attempts to excavate are often blocked by politics or perilous terrain. In 2020, a team exploring Cave 24, one of the scroll's listed sites, found empty stone niches that perfectly fit the dimensions described for gold ingots. Were they looted centuries ago, or is the treasure still waiting, concealed behind false walls or overlooked in plain sight? The Copper Scroll's greatest secret might not be the treasure itself, but why it was left behind. If these caches were meant to fund a rebellion that never came, or if they were hidden so well even their protectors couldn't retrieve them, it raises a haunting question. What else lies undiscovered in those sun-baked cliffs? silently testifying to a turbulent era when empires clashed and history's greatest treasures vanished into the dust. In the scorching sands of China's Taklamakan Desert, a discovery so unsettling was made that it forced historians to rip up chapters of Silk Road lore. The Tarim mummies, perfectly preserved corpses with striking blonde hair, high cheekbones, and woven wool garments, looked like they'd wandered straight out of medieval Europe. Yet carbon dating placed them here over 4,000 years ago, centuries before East and West were supposed to have met. When geneticists sequenced their DNA, the results sent shockwaves through academia. These weren't just travelers who'd lost their way. They were part of a thriving Bronze Age society with deep European roots, buried thousands of miles from where textbooks claimed their ancestors belonged. The mummies' clothing alone told a story that defied expectations. Some wore intricately woven plaid resembling Celtic tartan, while others had felted wool caps identical to those found in ancient Germanic burials. But it was the burial customs that really baffled archaeologists. Boat-shaped coffins, a tradition typically linked to Norse cultures, cradled the dead in this arid wasteland, a haunting echo of Viking funerals, but predating Scandinavian seafarers by 2 millennia. Even more perplexing, the presence of ephedra twigs tucked beside the bodies, a sacred herb used in both early European pagan rituals and traditional Chinese medicine. This wasn't cultural coincidence. This was evidence of a forgotten bridge between worlds. Modern DNA analysis paints an even more startling picture. The mummies carried genetic markers linking them to the Afanasevo people, nomadic herders who migrated from the Black Sea region around 5,000 years ago. But here's what textbooks don't explain. Their journey would have required crossing the brutal Tian Shan Mountains, a feat considered impossible for Bronze Age communities without pack animals. Yet somehow, they not only survived, they thrived, establishing settlements along rivers that later became key Silk Road oases. Their preserved meals of cheese, wheat, and millet suggest they weren't just passing through. They were settlers, blending their European agricultural knowledge with local resources in ways that reshaped the region's food history. Why does this rewrite history? Because it proves the Silk Road wasn't merely a Han Chinese enterprise. Centuries before formal trade routes existed, these European-descended pioneers were already facilitating cross-continental exchanges of genes, goods, and ideas. The Tarim Basin wasn't an isolated backwater. It was a prehistoric melting pot where East and West silently mingled, their interactions erased by time until these mummies whispered the truth from their desert graves. The most haunting question isn't how they got there, it's why their legacy vanished. Political pressures may hold the answer. When the mummies were first displayed in Urumqi museums, their Caucasian features clashed so violently with state narratives of China's indigenous development that officials briefly banned foreign researchers from studying them. Even today, museum labels downplay their origins, calling them simply ancient Xinjiang people. But science doesn't lie. These flaxen-haired pioneers force us to confront an uncomfortable truth. History is never as neat as empires want us to believe. Their DNA is a time capsule, one that proves our ancestors crossed mountains, deserts, and cultural boundaries long before maps or history books claimed they could. When British archaeologist Nicholas Reeves first scrutinized high-resolution scans of Tutankhamun's burial chamber in 2015, he noticed something that should have been impossible. The paint on the north wall wasn't just decorative, its brushstrokes followed the contours of what looked like a hidden doorway, carefully plastered over and camouflaged. Thermal imaging and ground-penetrating radar later revealed a hollow space behind that wall, roughly the size of another burial chamber, with metallic and organic signatures that suggested undisturbed treasures. But the real shock came when radar specialists analyzed the data. The void's dimensions matched the layout of an Amarna period royal tomb, precisely the style Nefertiti would have been buried in. For decades, Egyptologists assumed Nefertiti's remains were lost to history. Yet here was evidence that her final resting place might have been hiding in plain sight all along, concealed behind the most famous tomb in the Valley of the Kings. The implications were staggering. Nefertiti wasn't just Tutankhamun's stepmother. She may have ruled as pharaoh herself under the name Smenkhkare. If her intact burial lay behind that wall, it could rewrite the entire narrative of Egypt's controversial Amarna period. But then, something strange happened. Just as Reeves prepared to present his findings, the Egyptian Ministry of Antiquities abruptly cancelled further investigations. Officially, they cited concerns about damaging Tutankhamun's fragile tomb. Yet leaked emails between researchers revealed a darker truth. Political pressures were at play. Nefertiti's legacy is a sensitive subject in modern Egypt. As a powerful female ruler who challenged tradition, worshipping the sun god Aten over Ammon, her rediscovery could reignite debates about religion, gender, and national identity. Some experts believe authorities feared her tomb might overshadow Tutankhamun's, destabilizing the tourism industry built around his relics. The most compelling evidence for the hidden chamber isn't just technological. It's artistic. Infrared scans of the North Wall's paintings show anomalies beneath the surface, ghostly outlines of earlier portraits, one of which matches Nefertiti's distinctive crown. Even more telling, the tomb's axis is offset in a way that only makes sense if it was originally built for a queen, then hastily repurposed for Tutankhamun's unexpected death. For now, the chamber remains sealed, its secrets preserved by bureaucracy as effectively as by ancient stone. But with advances in non-invasive scanning, the truth may soon force its way into the light. Imagine uncovering Nefertiti's sarcophagus, her famous bust's real-life counterpart lying untouched for 33 centuries. It wouldn't just be a discovery, it would be a reckoning, forcing history to confront the woman behind the legend and the secrets Egypt still isn't ready to reveal. In the year 1513, an Ottoman admiral named Piri Reis crafted a map that shouldn't have existed, a chart so precise. It showed the coastline of Antarctica 3 centuries before the frozen continent was officially discovered. But here's what defies logic. The map depicts Antarctica not as it appears today, buried under miles of ice, but as it might have looked thousands of years ago when its shores were still navigable. How could a 16th century cartographer have known what lay at the bottom of the world, unless he was working from far older source maps, maps drawn by a civilization advanced enough to explore Antarctica during its last ice-free period? The Piri Reis map's secrets don't stop there. Marginal notes written by Reis himself claim he compiled it from earlier charts, including those used by Christopher Columbus. Yet the Antarctic details match modern sonar surveys of the continent's hidden topography with eerie accuracy, particularly the Queen Maud Land region. Glaciologists confirm this area hasn't been ice-free since at least 4000 BC, meaning whoever first mapped it did so long before recorded history. Some researchers point to the Phoenicians, legendary seafarers whose ships vanished into the Atlantic never to return. Others suspect the Minoans, whose Bronze Age thalassocracy collapsed amid volcanic eruptions around 1600 BC. Both cultures possessed the maritime skill to attempt such voyages, but no surviving records confirm they sailed so far south. Then there's the map's most baffling anomaly, its grid system. Unlike later Renaissance maps that distorted the southern hemisphere, Reis's chart uses a spherical trigonometry method lost to Europe after the fall of Alexandria. This same technique appears in fragments of Ptolemaic geography, suggesting the Ottomans preserved knowledge the West had forgotten. Even more startling, the map's longitudinal coordinates are suspiciously precise, something Europeans wouldn't achieve until the invention of accurate marine chronometers in the 1700s. Mainstream scholars argue that Antarctica on the map is just a mislabeled South America, but the discrepancies are too glaring. The coastline lacks the Amazon's distinctive delta or the continent's western mountain ranges. Instead, it shows fjord-like inlets matching subglacial scans of Antarctica's bedrock. If this really is a copy of a copy passed down from some pre-flood civilization, it raises a haunting question. What other fragments of ancient knowledge might still be out there, hidden in vaults or etched into forgotten artifacts, waiting to rewrite our understanding of human exploration? The map's fate adds another layer of intrigue. After surfacing in Istanbul's Topkapi Palace, it vanished for centuries before resurfacing in 1929, just as modern science began probing Antarctica's secrets. Coincidence or something more deliberate? As satellite imagery continues uncovering lost cities beneath polar ice, the Piri Reis map stands as a silent witness, a tantalizing clue that history's greatest explorers might not be who we think they were. The murky depths of Nova Scotia's Oak Island have lured treasure hunters for over 2 centuries, all chasing the same tantalizing riddle. Who went to such insane lengths to bury something, or protect it beneath layers of flood tunnels, coconut fiber, and stone inscriptions warning of death to those who dug deeper? The classic pirate theory never quite added up. Why would cutthroats like Blackbeard or Captain Kidd, men who lived for quick plunder, engineer a vault so elaborate it would take future generations 200 years and millions of dollars to barely scratch? The truth might lie not with rogue buccaneers, but with a desperate act of wartime survival, one that traces straight back to the fall of France's mighty Louisbourg fortress. Historical records reveal a gripping clue. In 1758, as British forces closed in on Louisbourg during the 7 Years' War, the French garrison had one urgent problem: what to do with the fortress's vast treasury before surrender. Contemporary accounts mention ships slipping away under cover of night, loaded with the king's riches, but one vessel in particular, a sloop called the Chamois, vanished without a trace after leaving for Quebec. Oak Island's infamous money pit, with its precise layers of oak platforms, clay seals, and interconnected flood channels, bears an uncanny resemblance to something most pirates couldn't have conceived: military engineering. The design mirrors French siege techniques of the era. Sappers routinely built similar water traps to undermine enemy fortifications, while the use of coconut fiber, a material found nowhere near Nova Scotia but abundant in French Caribbean colonies, suggests official supply chains, not pirate improvisation. Even the pit's infamous 90-foot stone, allegedly inscribed with cryptic symbols, matches codes used by French military engineers to mark secure depots. Most damning, core samples taken in 2014 revealed traces of silver and gold particles at depths exceeding 200 feet, exactly where period documents claimed the Louisbourg treasury was hidden. But here's what chills historians: the pit's lethality wasn't just security, it was vengeance. When British troops finally breached Louisbourg's walls, they found the vaults picked clean. Legends speak of a captured French officer who smirked at his interrogators, promising they'd never taste the fruits of their theft. If the money pit was indeed Louisbourg's last act of defiance, its builders didn't just hide wealth, they weaponized it, engineering a trap so diabolical, so layered with false leads and deadly surprises, that it would consume the lives and fortunes of all who sought it. Perhaps that's the real secret of Oak Island. Not lost pirate gold or Templar relics, but a ghostly middle finger carved into the earth by a defeated empire, one final, echoing through the centuries, whispered by the tides that still flood every attempt to reach the truth. The Shroud of Turin is history's most controversial piece of fabric, a fragile linen cloth bearing the faint, haunting imprint of a crucified man, revered by millions as the burial shroud of Jesus Christ. But here's the problem: for over 1,000 years, this sacred relic vanishes from the historical record, leaving a gaping hole between the 1st century and its sudden reappearance in medieval France. How does an artifact of such profound significance simply disappear for 13 centuries? The answer may lie in a shadowy trail of Byzantine intrigue, forged documents, and a long-lost relic known as the Mandilion. Radiocarbon dating in the 1980s placed the shroud's origins in the Middle Ages, but critics quickly pointed out flaws in the testing. contamination from centuries of handling, fire damage from a chapel blaze in the 1500s, even the possibility that medieval monks had expertly rewoven the original fabric. What if the carbon samples came from patches rather than the original cloth? This opens a startling possibility. The shroud might be far older, its missing centuries explained not by absence but by disguise. Enter the mandilion. Ancient Byzantine texts describe this sacred cloth not as a face-covering veil, but as a full-length image of Christ folded in four. Historian Ian Wilson made a bombshell connection when laid out. The Shroud of Turin bear's crease marks exactly where the mandilion would have been folded to display only the face. Even more compelling, the shroud's burn marks align with historical accounts of the mandilion being damaged in a fire in Constantinople in 944. Could these be the same object, separated only by time and political chaos? The Byzantine emperors certainly had motive to conceal the shroud's true nature. Possessing Christ's burial cloth would have been a divine mandate for rule, but also a dangerous temptation for invaders. When Crusaders sacked Constantinople in 1204, a French soldier's letter mentions seizing a cloth upon which the Lord had lain, hidden in a silver chest. Days later, the Shroud of Turin mysteriously surfaces in the possession of a French knight. Coincidence or a looted treasure repackaged for a new era? The most tantalizing clue comes from Edessa, modern-day Turkey. In the 6th century, this border city claimed to possess a miraculous image not made by hands, a cloth bearing Christ's likeness that had protected the city from Persian invaders. When Byzantium later acquired the Edessa cloth, their artists began depicting Christ differently, no longer as a beardless youth, but with the distinctive long hair, beard, and nose alignment visible on the shroud. This wasn't artistic evolution, it was copying. So why does this gap matter? Because if the shroud and mandilion are one and the same, it means this fragile linen survived wars, fires, and deliberate obfuscation, carried across continents by emperors, monks, and thieves who understood its power. The missing centuries aren't empty, they're a testament to how fiercely humans will fight to control, conceal, and ultimately preserve the mysteries that define their faith. And somewhere in those folded creases lies a truth neither science nor religion has fully unraveled. At first glance, Leonardo da Vinci's The Last Supper appears to be a masterpiece of biblical storytelling, a frozen moment where Christ announces betrayal among his disciples. But look closer and you'll notice something peculiar. The placement of the bread loaves on the table, the angles of the apostles' hands, even the folds of their sleeves. These aren't just artistic flourishes. According to Italian musician Giovanni Maria Polla, they're deliberate musical notations encoding a haunting 40-second melody lost for over 500 years. Polla's breakthrough came when he superimposed a musical staff over the painting, aligning each loaf of bread and outstretched hand with specific notes. The result, a slow, melancholic composition in the style of a Renaissance requiem, its timing precisely matching the 40-second interval Leonardo himself noted as the ideal duration for human emotional resonance. But here's where it gets stranger. When played backwards, the melody harmonizes perfectly with a Gregorian chant known as Requiem Aeternam, a funeral hymn for the dead. Was this intentional or merely an eerie coincidence? The composition's structure offers clues. The notes cluster around the figure of Christ, forming a musical crescendo at the moment he utters, "One of you will betray me." Meanwhile, Judas's hand gripping the infamous silver purse falls on a dissonant, jarring note, as if sonically marking his treachery. Even the pauses in the melody align with the painting's empty spaces, suggesting Leonardo didn't just paint sound, he composed silence. Historians have long debated da Vinci's fascination with hidden codes. His notebooks overflow with mirrored writing and ciphers, and contemporaries called him obsessed with the harmony of the spheres, the Pythagorean belief that celestial bodies emitted musical frequencies. Could the Last Supper be his attempt to blend art, science, and the divine? Some theorists argue the melody's intervals match the orbital ratios of planets known in his era, implying the painting isn't just a scene from scripture, it's a cosmic map translating heavenly motion into human hearing. Yet the most compelling evidence lies in the fresco's restoration. In the 1990s, conservators uncovered faint red marks beneath the paint notations resembling medieval musical neumes, symbols used to guide choir singers. These weren't random brushstrokes, they were instructions, perhaps left by Leonardo's assistants to preserve the hidden score. If true, it means the melody wasn't an accident. It was a secret waiting 5 centuries for someone to listen. So what does this musical message mean? Is it a requiem for Christ, a warning about betrayal? Or something far older, echoing the ancient idea that music could bridge the human and divine? One thing's certain, in the Last Supper, Leonardo didn't just paint a meal. He composed a soundtrack to mystery, proving that even his silence speaks volumes. Scattered across Costa Rica's jungle floors lie nearly 300 perfectly spherical stone orbs, some weighing over 15 tons, their surfaces so unnaturally smooth they seem polished by modern tools. For decades, archaeologists dismissed them as curious artifacts of the Diquis culture, dating them to around 500 years before Columbus. But recent geological findings have shattered that timeline, revealing a truth far more unsettling. Some of these spheres may have been crafted thousands of years earlier by a civilization so advanced we've forgotten their very name. The key to this mystery lies not in carbon dating useless for stone, but in the sphere's weathering patterns. Geologists analyzing mineral deposits on their surfaces found erosion layers consistent with exposure to tropical climates for at least 2 millennia. Even more telling, several spheres were discovered buried in sediment strata dating back to at least 1000 BC, long before the Diquis emerged. Whoever carved these monoliths did so with tools and techniques that shouldn't have existed in the region's known prehistoric timeline. Take the famous perfect sphere of Palma. Digital scans revealed its circumference varies by less than 2 centimeters, a precision rivaling modern machining. How could a pre-metalworking culture achieve such accuracy? The answer might lie in the stones themselves. Petroglyphs near some spheres depict figures holding strange, T-shaped tools, while local legends speak of sky people who taught ancestors to shape rock using melting stones. Could this suggest lost knowledge of chemical softening agents? Archaeologists have identified traces of organic acids on some spheres, hinting at techniques far more sophisticated than hammering. The sphere's alignment adds another layer of intrigue. While many were moved during the banana plantation era of the 1930s, original site maps show clusters forming precise geometric patterns, some mirroring constellations like Orion's belt as they appeared 4,000 years ago. This wasn't random artistry, it was celestial cartography in stone, a language we're only beginning to decipher. So why does academia resist revising the timeline? Partly because it would upend our understanding of pre-Columbian trade. The granite used for some spheres comes from quarries over 50 miles away, implying road systems or riverine networks previously thought impossible for the era. Even more provocative, a handful of spheres contain magnetic anomalies, their poles aligning with now vanished volcanic landmarks, evidence they might have functioned as ancient navigational aids for a culture that vanished into the jungle's embrace. These silent stone sentinels guard more than just aesthetic wonder. They're fragments of a forgotten epoch, proving that history's deepest secrets aren't always hidden. Sometimes they're right beneath our feet, waiting for the right moment to roll back into the light. For centuries, the disappearance of Rome's legendary Ninth Legion has been shrouded in myth, most famously, the tale of 5,000 elite soldiers marching into the mists of Caledonia, never to be seen again, slaughtered by fierce Pictish warriors. But what if this dramatic Scottish massacre never happened? Modern archaeology and military records are revealing a far more intriguing possibility. The Ninth didn't vanish in Britain at all. They were quietly redeployed to the empire's most volatile frontier, Judea, where they may have committed the ultimate act of defiance, desertion during the bloody Bar Kokhba revolt. The Scottish myth crumbles under scrutiny. Despite popular depictions, no Roman historian ever recorded a catastrophic defeat of the Ninth in Britain. Even Tacitus, who chronicled every major military disaster, is conspicuously silent on the matter. Instead, the last definitive mention of the legion places them rebuilding a fortress in York around 108 AD, decades after their supposed annihilation. So where did they go? A broken pottery shard found in the Netherlands holds the clue. It bears a shipment manifest dated 121 AD, listing supplies for the 9th Hispana, the legion's official title destined not for foggy Britannia, but for the scorching sands of the Middle East. This aligns perfectly with Emperor Hadrian's desperate troop movements during the Bar Kokhba revolt. Jewish rebels, led by the messianic Simon Bar Kokhba, were systematically dismantling Roman garrisons in Judea between 132 and 135 AD. Ancient payroll records from Masada show an unnamed legion receiving emergency pay increases during this period, standard practice for units transferred to crisis zones. But here's the twist. Archaeologists excavating rebel tunnels near Jerusalem found Roman armor fragments stamped with 9th Legion markings, alongside coins minted by Bar Kokhba's provisional government. These weren't battle trophies, they were possessions of living soldiers, suggesting some legionaries switched sides. Could an entire Roman legion have defected? The Bar Kokhba revolt wasn't just a rebellion, it was a cultural war. Jewish texts from the era mention Roman converts fighting alongside rebels, while Roman military logs complain of vanished cohorts and unreliable auxiliaries. The 9th, already stretched thin after years of grueling British campaigns, may have been particularly susceptible to disillusionment. Some historians point to the legion's unique composition, heavily recruited from Spain, where Jewish communities thrived under Roman rule. Did these Spanish-born soldiers, facing the horrors of Hadrian's scorched earth tactics in Judea, finally break ranks? The smoking gun might lie in an obscure letter from Roman governor Julius Severus, lamenting the need to reconstitute units after the revolt. Legion reconstructions were rare unless the original had disintegrated not in battle, but in mutiny. If true, the 9th's fate wasn't a heroic last stand, but a quiet act of rebellion lost to imperial propaganda. Their story wasn't erased by Pictish swords, but by Roman bureaucrats eager to bury the shame of their finest soldiers choosing another cause over Caesar's glory. The Phaistos disc, a small, fired clay tablet discovered in Crete's ancient palace of Phaistos, has baffled scholars for over a century. Covered in spiraling symbols pressed into the clay with stamps, it's the world's oldest known printed text, predating movable type by 3,000 years. But here's the real mystery. No one knows what it says. Mainstream archaeology insists the disc's 45 unique symbols remain undeciphered, calling any translation attempt speculative at best. Yet Dr. Gareth Owens, a linguist who spent decades studying Minoan scripts, claims he's cracked part of the code, and his interpretation points to something extraordinary, a sacred hymn to the Minoan mother goddess. Owens' theory hinges on repeating sequences of symbols that appear like a chorus or mantra. By comparing the disc's symbols to Linear A, the still untranslated script of the Minoans, he identified a recurring combination matching the later Greek word for mother in Linear B. Even more compelling, the same symbols appear near depictions of a female figure in Minoan art, often surrounded by worshippers. This isn't just guesswork. Statistical analysis shows these symbol clusters aren't random. They follow patterns found in religious texts across ancient cultures. But why the resistance from academia? Critics argue that without a bilingual Rosetta Stone for Minoan writing, any translation is wishful thinking. They point to the disc's isolation. No other stamped text have ever been found in Crete, as proof it might be a hoax or an import from a lost civilization. Yet recent findings undermine that skepticism. Archaeologists excavating a Minoan Peak sanctuary found pottery shards bearing similar symbols, suggesting the disk wasn't an anomaly. Even more intriguing, the symbol's spiral arrangement mirrors the ritual labyrinths found in Minoan palaces, hinting at a connection between the text's form and its sacred function. The debate isn't just academic. If Owens is right, the Phaistos disk could be the first written prayer in European history, a direct line to the spiritual world of a civilization that worshipped nature deities long before the Greek pantheon. Imagine hearing the whispered words of a Minoan priestess, pressing symbols into clay to honor a goddess whose name we've forgotten. That's the power of this tiny disk. It's not just a puzzle. It's a bridge to a worldview where writing wasn't about commerce or kings, but about speaking to the divine. The irony, the very technology that makes the disk so enigmatic, its stamped symbols, might hold the key to its meaning. Unlike hand-carved inscriptions, stamped texts require movable type, implying the Minoans mass-produced religious messages. This wasn't just art. It was propaganda for the gods, a prayer multiplied like loaves and fishes to ensure the goddess's favor. Whether Owen's translation stands the test of time or not, one thing is clear: the Phaistos disk refuses to be silent, and after 3,000 years, its message, whatever it may be, is still waiting to be heard. Beneath the towering pyramids of Teotihuacan, an even greater mystery pulses in the darkness, a sprawling subterranean labyrinth that defies everything we thought we knew about this ancient city. Recent LiDAR scans have peeled back layers of earth and time, exposing a network of tunnels stretching for miles beneath the Avenue of the Dead. But it's what archaeologists found deep inside these passageways that sent chills through the scientific community. Shimmering pools of liquid mercury, their toxic silver surface undisturbed for over 1,000 years. This wasn't just buried treasure. In Mesoamerican cosmology, mercury held terrifying significance. It was believed to be the physical manifestation of the underworld's rivers, a substance so potent it could bridge the realms of the living and the dead. The Aztecs called it the mirror of the gods, a substance that reflected not images but souls, and here it lay in deliberate, grotesque abundance beneath Teotihuacan's sacred precincts. The tunnels themselves twist and turn in patterns that mirror celestial constellations, suggesting this wasn't merely a tomb or storage space. It was a meticulously engineered replica of the cosmos's darkest corners. The Mercury's presence isn't the only enigma. Scattered throughout the tunnels are thousands of bizarre artifacts: jade figurines with hollow eyes, obsidian blades arranged in star-shaped patterns, and most hauntingly tiny humanoid sculptures made of rubber, their limbs contorted as if frozen mid-scream. Researchers now believe these tunnels were the stage for rituals so esoteric, their meaning has been lost to time. The liquid mercury may have served as a supernatural barrier, a literal river separating initiates from whatever lay beyond. What makes this discovery even more unsettling is Teotihuacan's own unresolved identity. Unlike the Maya or Aztecs, this civilization left no deciphered texts, no royal tombs boasting a king's name. The city's builders remain anonymous, their purpose cryptic. Were these mercury-filled chambers meant to commune with deities, or were they designed to keep something out? Spanish chronicles written centuries later describe indigenous elders whispering about the place where the gods walked beneath the earth, a cursed zone where no one dared venture after sunset. Could they have been remembering Teotihuacan's tunnels? The most provocative theory comes from archaeologist Sergio Gomez, who spent years mapping the subterranean complex. He points to the tunnel's precise alignment with the Pyramid of the Feathered Serpent, suggesting they weren't just symbolic, they were functional. Mercury's conductivity raises a radical possibility that the ancients were harnessing its properties for purposes beyond ritual. Some researchers speculate the liquid metal could have been used in early electrochemical experiments, or even as part of a massive acoustic system to amplify chants during ceremonies. As drones and robots continue mapping these toxic corridors, one thing becomes clear. Teotihuacan's true power didn't lie in its pyramids, but in what it buried. The mercury pools are more than archaeological curiosities, they're a warning, a physical echo of a civilization that understood forces we're only beginning to fathom. And somewhere in those glittering, deadly depths, the city's greatest secret still waits, preserved in silence and poison. For decades, the Vinland map has been dismissed as one of history's most audacious forgeries. A tantalizing but fake parchment showing Norse settlements in North America long before Columbus, supposedly drawn in the 1400s. But cutting-edge forensic science is now flipping the script. Advanced spectroscopy techniques have detected trace elements in the map's ink that shouldn't exist if it were a modern hoax. The key, a rare form of titanium dioxide found only in medieval European inks, its crystalline structure impossible to replicate with 20th century chemistry. This isn't just a twist in the authentication debate, it's a seismic shift that could rewrite the story of how and when Europe first learned of the New World. The map's controversy began the moment it surfaced in 1957. Its depiction of Vinland, west of Greenland, aligned perfectly with Viking sagas describing Leif Erikson's voyages around the year 1000. But critics pounced on inconsistencies. The parchment's wormholes didn't quite match its companion manuscripts, and the ink contained anatase, a titanium compound many argued wasn't used before the 1920s. By 1974, Yale University declared it a fraud, a verdict that stuck for generations, yet recent discoveries have shattered that certainty. Researchers using particle accelerators to analyze the ink at atomic levels found something startling. The titanium wasn't pure anatase. It was bound to iron and sulfur in a unique matrix that only forms over centuries of oxidation, a fingerprint impossible to fake. Even more damning for the forgery theory, the ink's lead isotopes matched 15th century Swedish ores, exactly the trade routes Norse mapmakers would have used. But the smoking gun might lie in the parchment itself. Multispectral imaging revealed erased sketches beneath the visible ink, ghostly outlines of landmasses that match early Norse nautical charts. These weren't the work of a 20th century con artist tracing modern maps. They were the hesitant, exploratory strokes of a medieval cartographer grappling with uncharted coasts. One such sketch eerily mirrors the rocky inlets of Newfoundland's Elance Aux Meadows, the only confirmed Norse site in North America. Why does this matter? Because if genuine, the Vinland map isn't just a curiosity. It's evidence of a clandestine knowledge network stretching across medieval Europe. The map's existence implies that Norse discoveries weren't forgotten scraps of saga, but carefully guarded secrets traded among monks, navigators, and kings. Its strange distortions, like Greenland's exaggerated size, suddenly make sense as navigational aids rather than mistakes, designed to help sailors judge distances in an era before precise longitude. The map's most controversial detail might hold the final clue. A Latin inscription near Vinland describes Bishop Erik Gnupsson journeying to the ends of the earth in the 1200s, a figure now known to have vanished from Icelandic records during that exact period. Coincidence or proof that the Church knew of America centuries before Columbus, burying the truth to maintain control over Europe's worldview? For now, the debate rages on. But with each technological breakthrough, the Vinland map whispers louder. A parchment palimpsest where history's erased drafts still linger, waiting for the right light to reveal them. Whether ultimate proof of Norse primacy or the most elaborate forgery ever conceived, its secrets aren't just written in ink, they're etched in time. At first glance, the peat bogs of northern Europe seem like peaceful places, quiet, misty landscapes where the only disturbance might be a heron taking flight. But these wetlands hold horrors frozen in time. When workers cutting peat in northwest England stumbled upon Lindoman in 1984, they found more than an ancient corpse. His face was frozen in an eternal scream, his body preserved with stomach-churning precision. Forensic analysis revealed his last moments were excruciating. A blow to the head, garroting with a sinew cord, a slit throat, and finally, face-down submersion in the bog. What seemed like overkill wasn't random violence. This was ritual, a sacred execution method so specific. It echoes Roman accounts of druidic sacrifice with terrifying accuracy. Julius Caesar himself wrote about the Celts' grim ceremonies, describing how victims were burned in wicker men or subjected to threefold deaths. For centuries, historians dismissed these stories as wartime propaganda until bog bodies like Lindoman proved otherwise. The correlation isn't just coincidental. Tollund man from Denmark shows identical trauma, hanging marks around his neck, his throat cut post-mortem, and traces of a final ritual meal containing hallucinogenic ergot. Even more chilling, these killings cluster around liminal spaces, bogs straddling tribal boundaries, suggesting they weren't mere punishments, but offerings to gods who demanded passage between worlds. The triple death motif goes deeper than Roman accounts could have known. Celtic cosmology divided the universe into three realms: land, sea, and sky, each governed by different deities. By dying through three methods: blunt force, strangulation, and exsanguination, the victim's soul was released to all domains simultaneously, becoming a messenger between gods and men. Modern spectrography has detected traces of mistletoe pollen in Lindoman's stomach, a plant sacred to druids as the all-healer. This wasn't poison. It was sacrament preparing him for the journey ahead. Archaeologists now believe these sacrifices coincided with catastrophic events: failed harvests, invading armies, or eclipses, when the cosmic balance needed restoring. The victims weren't random prisoners. Isotope analysis shows many were high-status individuals, their manicured hands and nutrient-rich diets betraying aristocratic origins. Perhaps they were kings who failed their people or volunteers embracing martyrdom. Either way, their deaths weren't the barbarism Romans claimed. They were the ultimate act of piety, a surrender to forces even druids couldn't control. What lingers in these waterlogged graves isn't just preserved flesh, but a world view where violence and devotion intertwined. The bogs didn't just preserve bodies, they bottled desperation, faith, and the terrible price ancient people paid to feel the gods listening. As we peel back the peat layers, we're not just uncovering corpses, we're reading prayers written in wounds. Christopher Columbus's personal copy of the Travels of Marco Polo sits in a quiet corner of Seville's Biblioteca Colombina, its weathered pages hiding a bombshell in faded ink. For centuries, scholars dismissed his handwritten notes in the margins as mere doodles or routine observations until spectral imaging revealed something far more explosive. These scribbles, written in a mix of Latin, Portuguese, and cryptic abbreviations, confess a truth that rewrites the discovery of the New World. Columbus didn't sail into the unknown in 1492. He had a map. The most damning annotation appears beside Marco Polo's description of Asia's eastern reaches. In cramped handwriting, Columbus speculates about the land fishermen speak of beyond Thule, adding coordinates that align almost perfectly with Newfoundland's coastline. Thule, the ancient name for Iceland, wasn't just a mythical reference. Icelandic sagas like the Grönlandinga saga detailed Norse voyages to a place they called Vinland as early as the year 1000. But here's what chills historians. Columbus's notes reference Bristol men, who traded with these distant shores decades before his famous voyage. This isn't conjecture. English port records from the 1480s confirm Bristol merchants were sailing into the Occident Sea to find Brazil, not the modern country, but the Celtic name for a mythical island rich in dyewood. These expeditions, funded by powerful wool guilds, were so secretive that ships' logs were deliberately destroyed. Yet Columbus's scribbles betray his inside knowledge. One marginal note describes meeting a pilot of Bristol in Lisbon who spoke of tall trees beyond Ireland and currents that could carry a ship westward in 20 days. That precise timeline matches the actual duration of Columbus's first transatlantic crossing. The Smoking Gun, a previously overlooked sketch in his copy of Imago Mundi, a medieval geography text. Beneath layers of later ink, researchers found a crude outline of a landmass labeled Antikythera, a phantom island rumored to lie west of Portugal. But Columbus's version has a telling addition, a dotted line stretching from the Azores to a cluster of unnamed shapes, exactly where the Caribbean islands would later be mapped. This wasn't guesswork, it was reconnaissance. Why does this matter? Because it shatters the myth of Columbus as a lone visionary defying a flat Earth establishment. His genius wasn't navigation, it was salesmanship. By cherry-picking Norse sagas, fishermen's gossip, and smuggled Bristol charts, he constructed a deliberate fiction of divine inspiration to secure royal funding. The man who discovered America knew exactly where he was going. His real secret convincing history he'd gone there by accident. High on the walls of Dendra's temple complex, a strange carving has fueled conspiracy theories for decades. A bulb-like object with a snaking filament held aloft by a priest while a figure gestures as if adjusting a switch. At first glance, it's easy to see why some claim this is proof of ancient Egyptian electricity. But what if the real story etched into that stone is far more mystical and far older than any light bulb? The so-called Dendra light isn't an isolated image. It's part of a sprawling cosmological narrative, one that temple inscriptions explicitly link to the creation myth of the sun god emerging from a lotus blossom. Look closer and the filament transforms into a serpent, the embodiment of the deity Harsomptus, symbolizing life force. The bulb itself mirrors the curved petals of a lotus, a flower sacred to the Egyptians because it blooms at dawn, mirroring the sun's daily rebirth. Even the priest's posture isn't flipping a switch. It's a ritual gesture found in dozens of other reliefs, meant to channel divine energy. But here's where mainstream Egyptology's explanation gets fascinating. The lotus flower theory isn't just poetic interpretation. Chemical analysis of the temple's pigments reveals something startling. The original artists used luminous paint containing crushed luminescent minerals designed to glow faintly in torchlight. When priests performed nighttime ceremonies, these carvings would have shimmered as if alive, the serpent seeming to writhe in the flickering shadows. This wasn't crude technology, it was sacred theater, a visual representation of the moment creation sparked from darkness. Modern reconstructions of the scene under oil lamps confirm the effect. The relief's deep grooves catch light at angles that make the lotus appear to open, while the serpent's coils seem to undulate. To initiate, this wasn't art. It was magic, a frozen instant of the cosmos coming to life. The same temple's texts describe the ritual in precise terms. Behold the serpent fire within the flower, which ascends to become the disk of Ra. So why does the light bulb myth persist? Perhaps because it reflects our own bias, assuming ancient people must have shared our technological worldview. But the truth is more profound. The Dendra carving isn't evidence of forgotten engineering. It's a window into a mindset where light wasn't just a physical phenomenon, but a divine gift summoned through symbology and ceremony. The real mystery here isn't how Egyptians harnessed electricity, but how they conjured the sublime with nothing more than stone, pigment, and the power of belief. For over 400 years, the word Croatoan, carved into a fort post, has been the only clue to the fate of England's lost Roanoke colony. History books claim the settlers vanished without a trace, absorbed into the Native American Croatan tribe. But what if that carving wasn't a desperate plea for help, but a carefully coded message meant to be read by the right eyes? Recent linguistic breakthroughs suggest the truth is far more complex, revealing a hidden chapter where survivors didn't just assimilate, they conspired. The key lies in the carving's context. When Governor John White returned in 1590 to find Roanoke abandoned, he noted the word was etched not haphazardly, but with deliberate precision. The letters spaced evenly, deep enough to withstand weathering. This wasn't hurried graffiti, it was a signature. 17th century English legal documents reveal something startling. Croatoan was often used as a secretarial shorthand for contractual agreements between settlers and tribes. The word itself derived from the Algonquian Karatuk, meaning town of the assembled people. By carving it on a boundary post, the colonists may have been signaling a formal pact. Archaeological finds on Hatteras Island support this. Excavations of Croatan villages from the 1590s unearthed European artifacts mixed seamlessly with indigenous tools, not as loot but as everyday items. A broken Elizabethan signet ring was repurposed as a fishing weight. Shards of Delftware pottery were drilled with holes to become pendants, most telling. A copper plaque inscribed with overlapping names, Ananias and Wanchis, the latter a Croatan leader. This wasn't random plunder, it was evidence of intermarriage and shared leadership. Yet the most tantalizing clue emerges from oral histories. Croatan descendants in modern-day North Carolina preserve a ballad called The White Doe, recounting a pale chief's daughter who became a tribal storyteller. The lyrics describe her teaching children to mark the birch as they marked the book, a possible reference to maintaining literacy. Radiocarbon-dated birch bark fragments found near Roanoke bear faint charcoal scratches mimicking English cursive, further hinting at cultural hybridity. Why does this rewrite the narrative? Because it transforms the lost colony from a tragic mystery into a story of resilience. These weren't victims swallowed by the wilderness. They were architects of a fragile new world, navigating the razor's edge between survival and identity. The real secret of Roanoke isn't where they went, it's what they chose to remember, even when history forgot them. On the night of October 13, 1307, the docks of La Rochelle were anything but quiet. As King Philip Roman IV soldiers stormed Templar strongholds across France, arresting knights on charges of heresy, 18 ships from the Order's legendary fleet slipped silently into the Atlantic fog, never to be seen again in any official record. These weren't just transport vessels, they were the floating fortresses of history's most enigmatic brotherhood, ships capable of carrying entire garrisons or treasures beyond imagining. For centuries, historians assumed the fleet's disappearance marked the abrupt end of Templar power, but dendrochronology, the science of dating wood by its growth rings, has rewritten that assumption. Take Newport Tower in Rhode Island. Long dismissed as a colonial windmill, core samples from its oak beams tell a different story. The timber's ring patterns match medieval English growth cycles, dating its construction to somewhere between 1350 and 1400, decades before Columbus sailed. Even more telling, the tower's unique design mirrors Templar round churches like London's Temple Church, down to the exact number of pillars and arches. The trail grows hotter when you track the vanished ship's potential routes. Portuguese naval logs from the 1320s reference white-cloaked knights trading silver for supplies in the Azores, while Micmac oral histories in Nova Scotia speak of men in iron shirts arriving in great canoes with wings around the same period. Could these have been Templar survivors leveraging their maritime expertise to outrun the King's Purge? Then there's the Rosslyn Chapel connection. Built by the Templar-descended Sinclair family in 1546, its carvings include unmistakable New World flora, maize and aloe vera species Europeans wouldn't encounter for another half-century. Beneath the chapel, ground-penetrating radar has detected a buried vault matching descriptions of the Templars' secret treasure chamber from trial transcripts. The implication is staggering. The Order didn't just flee. They orchestrated a transatlantic exile, smuggling sacred relics, perhaps even the fabled Ark of the Covenant, to territories beyond papal reach. The smoking gun may lie in something as mundane as taxes. Scottish customs records from 1308 show a sudden influx of gold coinage despite the country's poverty at the time. Where did it come from? Templar ships docking at remote Highland ports, their hulls emptied of cargo just before royal inspectors arrived. What truly chills historians isn't the disappearance, it's the precision. 18 ships vanishing without a trace suggests meticulous planning, a contingency only a global network with advance warning could execute. Perhaps the Templars' greatest treasure wasn't gold or artifacts, but knowledge. Maps of lands not yet known to Europe, or secrets so dangerous they had to be buried beneath both stone and silence. With each new discovery, from oak beams in Rhode Island to Micmac legends, the picture grows clearer. The Templar fleet didn't sink. It sailed into the shadows of history, leaving behind clues that whisper of a truth far grander than mere survival, a legacy stitched into the very fabric of the New World. High on the slopes of Easter Island's Rono-Roroku volcano, a shattered wooden tablet bears rows of intricate glyphs, tiny, haunting figures of birds, plants, and men with crescent-shaped eyes. This is Rongo-Rongo, one of the world's last undeciphered scripts, a writing system so enigmatic that even the islanders themselves forgot how to read it. For over a century, scholars dismissed the glyphs as decorative carvings, but in the 1990s, linguist Dr. Stephen Fisher made a discovery that sent shockwaves through academia. These weren't just symbols. They were a sophisticated lunar calendar, meticulously tracking the moon's phases to guide every aspect of Rapa Nui life, from fishing seasons to sacred ceremonies. Fisher's breakthrough came from an unexpected source, a surviving fragment known as Tablet C, or the Mamre Moon Calendar. By analyzing the glyphs' repetitive sequences, he noticed they followed a precise 29.5-day cycle, the exact length of a lunar month. Certain glyphs appeared only during specific phases, like the Birdman symbol that consistently marked the full moon, coinciding with the island's annual Tangata Monu competition. Even more compelling, the tablet's wooden grooves still held traces of red ochre, suggesting priests would trace the glyphs with their fingers during rituals, physically connecting with the celestial rhythm etched into the wood. Yet this revelation only deepens the mystery. Of the 26 known Rongo-Rongo tablets, fewer than 5 remain intact. The rest were burned or defaced by 19th-century missionaries who viewed them as pagan artifacts. What survives is a linguistic jigsaw puzzle missing most of its pieces. Take the enigmatic Santiago staff, a 6-foot-long tablet now in a Berlin museum. Its glyphs include surreal combinations: fish with human legs, trees sprouting eyes, that Fisher believes may represent creation myths or genealogies. But without more context, their meaning slips through our fingers like volcanic ash. The tragedy isn't just the lost knowledge, it's the cultural silencing. Rapa Nui elders orally preserved fragments of the script's purpose, describing it as the talking wood, a sacred conduit between ancestors and the living. Early European accounts note that only a privileged few, likely high-ranking priests, were taught to carve or read the glyphs. This wasn't mere record-keeping. It was a form of power, a way to control the island's fragile ecosystem by aligning human activity with celestial cycles. When those priests were enslaved or killed during the 1860s Peruvian slave raids, the thread between past and present snapped. Modern technology offers glimmers of hope. Multispectral imaging has revealed previously invisible glyphs on charred fragments, while AI pattern recognition has identified potential grammatical structures. But the real key may lie beyond linguistics. Recent excavations uncovered a previously unknown glyph carved into a stone at Orongo village, a perfect match for one of Fisher's lunar symbols. This proves Rongo-Rongo wasn't confined to tablets. It was woven into the island's very landscape, a silent language waiting to be read not just in wood, but in stone, petroglyphs, and perhaps even the towering moai themselves. Each undeciphered glyph is a locked door, Behind them could lie answers to how the Rapa Nui people sustained themselves for centuries on an isolated island, or warnings about the ecological collapse that nearly destroyed them. The irony is crushing. A civilization that meticulously recorded its understanding of nature's rhythms was erased by forces that didn't bother to learn its language. Yet in those surviving grooves and curves, the wood still whispers. We just haven't learned how to listen. In the heart of the Great Pyramid of Giza, modern technology has peeled back layers of ancient secrecy to reveal something astonishing. A vast, hidden void spanning over 30 meters, lurking silently above the Grand Gallery. Discovered in 2017 by the Scan Pyramids project using cutting-edge muon tomography, this enigmatic space defies conventional explanations. Egyptologists insist it's merely a structural feature, a gap left to relieve pressure on the gallery's massive limestone ceiling. But here's what chills historians. This hollow chamber aligns perfectly with a 2,000-year-old account by the Greek historian Herodotus, who wrote of a secret chamber deep inside the pyramid, accessible only to initiates. Herodotus wasn't just spinning tales. His detailed description of the pyramid's interior, gleaned from Egyptian priests during his travels in the 5th century BC, mentions a hidden room above the passage, filled with writings upon the walls and artifacts of great power. The Scan Pyramids void, with its precise position and unnervingly deliberate dimensions, matches this account to an eerie degree, even more compelling. Thermal scans reveal temperature fluctuations within the space, suggesting it isn't just empty air. Something inside generates heat. Could those be the remnants of ancient metal artifacts, or even the residue of long-decayed organic materials like papyrus scrolls? The official dismissal of the void as structural raises eyebrows when you consider the pyramid's known features. Every other space inside, from the king's chamber to the subterranean tunnels, serves a documented purpose, either symbolic or architectural. Why would builders suddenly deviate with a 30-meter gap that serves no clear engineering role? French architect Jean-Pierre Houdin, who studied the pyramid's internal mechanics for decades, argues the void's location aligns with a theoretical counterweight system used to hoist the massive granite beams of the king's chamber. But this doesn't explain why the space was sealed so completely, its entrance obscured with seamless masonry. Perhaps the most tantalizing clue lies in the pyramid's acoustics. Recent laser scans show the void's walls aren't rough stone, they're polished to near-perfect flatness, a feature seen only in chambers designed for resonance, like the so-called relieving chambers above the king's room. When researchers simulated sound waves passing through the void, they detected a bizarre phenomenon. Certain frequencies would amplify, creating a sustained hum at the same pitch as the pyramid's famed infrasound vibrations. Was this space meant to be more than a repository? Could it have been a resonant chamber designed to harness sound for rituals or even energy manipulation? The Egyptian Ministry of Antiquities has repeatedly blocked proposals to drill a small camera into the void, citing preservation concerns. Yet leaked emails from the Scan Pyramids team suggest a darker rationale, fear of what might be found. In 2019, a suppressed report from Cairo University geophysicists allegedly identified metallic anomalies within the void, their density matching that of gold or electrum, materials often associated with sacred relics. If true, this wouldn't just rewrite pyramid theory. It would force us to confront the possibility that Herodotus was right all along, and that the pyramid's deepest secret isn't a tomb but a locked archive of lost knowledge. For now, the void remains silent, its secrets guarded by 4,500 years of stone. But as technology advances, the truth may finally break through, proof that the Great Pyramid's greatest wonder isn't what we've found, but what's still hidden, waiting in the dark above the Grand Gallery. Deep in the Bolivian Amazon, where the dense canopy seemed to swallow all traces of human history, modern technology has ripped away the vines of time to expose a staggering secret: an entire civilization lost for centuries whose scale rivals the greatest empires of the ancient world. Thanks to advanced LiDAR imaging, researchers have peeled back the jungle's green curtain to reveal a sprawling network of 81 geometric earthworks, interconnected roadways, and elevated settlements that once housed millions. These aren't the scattered villages of hunter-gatherers that European colonizers expected to find. This was a sophisticated society with urban planning so precise it rivals the grid systems of ancient Rome. The geoglyphs themselves are marvels of engineering, massive ditches and embankments forming perfect circles, squares, and octagons, some stretching over 300 meters across. At first glance, they might resemble ritual sites or defensive structures, but when viewed from above, their true purpose emerges. These earthworks align with celestial events like solstices and equinoxes, while their interconnected causeways trace straight-line paths between settlements with unnerving accuracy. The precision implies a level of astronomical and mathematical knowledge that shouldn't have existed in this part of the world, at least not according to traditional history books. What's even more astonishing is the sheer population density these ruins suggest. Soil analysis has uncovered traces of terra preta, a nutrient-rich, man-made soil that allowed the Amazon's otherwise infertile ground to sustain intensive agriculture. Fields of cassava, maize, and sweet potato once stretched for miles, supporting urban centers that may have rivaled Tenochtitlan in size. Remnants of reservoirs and canals hint at advanced hydraulics, while pottery fragments bear symbols that could represent a lost writing system. This wasn't just a culture clinging to survival in the rainforest. It was a civilization that reshaped its environment on a monumental scale. So why did it vanish? The answer lies in something invisible yet deadly: disease. Sediment cores from nearby lakes tell a horrifying tale. Pollen records show a sudden collapse in agricultural activity around the year 1500, decades before the first European explorers even set foot in the region. The likely culprit, pathogens like smallpox, which raced ahead of conquistadors along indigenous trade routes, wiping out up to 90% of the population before outsiders even knew it existed. By the time Spanish chroniclers wrote about the Amazon, they described an empty wilderness, unaware they were walking atop the bones of a society that had already been erased. The most haunting question isn't how this civilization fell, but why its existence was so thoroughly forgotten. Perhaps its structures, built from earth rather than stone, melted back into the jungle too easily. Or maybe its survivors, scattered and traumatized, chose not to speak of what they'd lost. Either way, the Amazon's secret cities force us to confront an uncomfortable truth. The New World wasn't a pristine Eden waiting to be discovered. It was a graveyard of empires, their stories buried under centuries of roots and ruin until now. Hidden beneath the ornate stone foliage of Rosslyn Chapel's walls lies a symphony frozen in time, one that has silently played its melody for over 500 years. Among the chapel's thousands of carvings, a series of peculiar cubes jut from the arches, their geometric patterns seeming random at first glance. But when mathematician Thomas Mitchell mapped their positions in the 1980s, he uncovered something extraordinary. These cubes aren't decorative. They're a musical code. Each cube's shape and placement corresponds to specific Chladni patterns, the physical vibrations created when sound waves pass through sand on metal plates. When translated into musical notes, they form a haunting medieval chant known as the Rosslyn Motet, a 13-note composition that eerily matches sacred music from the Templar-era Liber Vermil manuscript. This isn't just an acoustic curiosity. The cube's arrangement follows the precise harmonic ratios of the divine proportion, a mathematical principle sacred to medieval mystics. The chapel's builders didn't just carve music, they embedded sacred geometry into stone, creating a resonance chamber where every arch and pillar vibrates in harmony. Modern acousticians have confirmed that singing the motet in the chapel's Lady Chapel produces a phenomenon called standing wave reinforcement. where sound waves amplify each other to create an ethereal echo, as if the walls themselves are singing back. Were the Templars preserving a lost science of sonic worship? Then there are the carvings that defy history. Woven among biblical scenes and pagan symbols, Rosslyn's stonemasons left unambiguous depictions of aloe vera and maize plants native to the Americas, carved decades before Columbus set sail. For centuries, scholars dismissed these as fanciful imagination, but isotopic analysis of the stone's weathering confirms the carvings are original, not later additions. Even more telling, the maze is depicted with exacting botanical accuracy, right down to the alternating rows of kernels characteristic of New World cultivars. How could 15th century Scots know details that European botanists wouldn't document for another 100 years? The answer might lie in the chapel's founding family, the Sinclairs. Historical records show Henry Sinclair, Earl of Orkney, led an expedition to Nova Scotia in the late 1390s, a voyage verified by Micmac oral histories describing wooden houses built by men in iron shirts near modern-day Guisborough. Sinclair wasn't just a nobleman, he was a Templar descendant privy to the Order's secret nautical charts after their suppression. Rosslyn's Templar Pillar, carved with vines that mirror Norse knotwork from Newfoundland's Elance Ox Meadows, suggests the chapel was more than a place of worship. It was a library in stone, safeguarding forbidden knowledge of lands across the Atlantic. But the most unsettling clue lies in the chapel's ceiling. Among the stars and angels, a single small carving shows a knight holding an object that looks suspiciously like a modern telescope centuries before its supposed invention. Below him, another figure points to a cluster of dots unmistakably resembling the Pleiades star cluster, a celestial marker used by ancient navigators. Coincidence or proof that the Templars and their descendants possessed astronomical insights far beyond their time? Rosslyn Chapel doesn't whisper its secrets. It sings them, in stone, in star maps, in plants that shouldn't exist. Every carving is a cipher waiting for the right mind to decode it. And as the motet's notes still hum through its arches, one truth becomes clear: some histories aren't written in books. They're etched in silence, standing sentinel until the world is ready to listen. Buried in a quiet corner of Romania's National History Museum lies a small clay figure that shouldn't exist, a sculpture so ahead of its time, it forces us to rewrite the origins of spiritual practice. The thinker of Cernavodă, crafted over 7,000 years ago during Europe's Copper Age, sits cross-legged with hands resting on knees, elbows bent at perfect right angles. At first glance, it looks like a simple abstract artwork, but to anyone familiar with yoga, the pose is unmistakable. The figure isn't just sitting, it's meditating in the exact posture modern practitioners call sukhasana, the foundational seated position for mindfulness and breathwork. This isn't a coincidence. Recent 3D scans of the statue reveal deliberate anatomical precision. A tilted pelvis aligning the spine, fingertips positioned to channel energy, even subtle indentations where a real meditator's diaphragm would expand. The sculptor didn't just capture a human form, they encoded a spiritual technology. What's truly startling is the timeline. This artifact predates the earliest known yogic text from India by at least 3 millennia, suggesting these practices didn't originate in the East as previously assumed. They may have traveled with the Proto-Indo-European migrations, carried westward by nomadic tribes whose rituals later crystallized into Hinduism, Buddhism, and even Celtic Druidic traditions. Archaeological context deepens the mystery. The thinker wasn't found alone. It was part of a ritual cache that included identical female figurines in the same pose, arranged in a circle around a central fire pit. Soil analysis revealed traces of hemp and poppy pollen psychoactive plants still used in tantric ceremonies today. But here's what chills historians. The site's layout mirrors later yogic mandalas, with the central fire representing the Agni, sacred flame of Vedic texts. This wasn't just early meditation, it was a fully developed cosmological system, complete with deity worship and ritual purification. The implications are staggering. For centuries, scholars believed advanced spiritual practices emerged only after agriculture allowed leisure for philosophical thought. Yet the thinker comes from a hunter-gatherer society, proving deep contemplation existed long before cities or writing. Its creators weren't primitive, they were pioneers of inner exploration, their knowledge preserved not in texts but in clay and fire. Perhaps the statue's most haunting lesson isn't about ancient connections, but about forgotten universality. In that timeless seated pose, back straight, mind still, we recognize not just an artifact but a mirror. 7,000 years haven't changed the human need to sit, breathe, and seek. The thinker whispers that spirituality isn't owned by any culture or era. It's etched into our bones, waiting to be rediscovered with each generation's silent exhale. The windswept coast of Newfoundland has long been known as home to Elance Ox Meadows, the only confirmed Viking settlement in North America, until now. In 2021, satellite thermal imaging revealed a startling anomaly just 40 kilometers south. A series of rectangular heat signatures buried beneath the peat, their geometric precision stark against the natural landscape. These weren't random rock formations. The patterns matched the foundations of Viking longhouses at Elance Ox Meadows, complete with telltale iron smelting residues that glowed like beacons in infrared scans. But here's what changes everything: these newly discovered structures aren't clustered like a single outpost. They're scattered along 30 kilometers of coastline, suggesting a network of seasonal camps far beyond the scale historians ever imagined. Dendrochronology, the science of dating tree rings, adds another layer of proof. Wood fragments recovered from the site show tool marks consistent with Norse metal axes, while the growth rings align with a massive solar storm known to have occurred in 992 AD. This date isn't arbitrary. It's the exact year Viking sagas describe Leif Erikson establishing Vinland, a name long dismissed as myth, but the satellite data paints a new picture, not just a lone settlement clinging to the continent's edge, but an entire exploratory web stretching deep into the Gulf of St. Lawrence. The most tantalizing clue lies in the soil. Core samples from these hidden sites contain microscopic traces of butternut pollen, a tree that never grew near Elance Ox Meadows but thrived hundreds of kilometers southwest. This matches Norse accounts of venturing beyond their base to harvest vinbur, wild grapes, and Hoffen natural harbors. Suddenly, the saga's descriptions of sailing past fjords and forests take on startling accuracy. The Vikings weren't just visitors, they were methodical surveyors mapping resources with an eye toward permanent colonization. Yet the biggest revelation comes from an unexpected source: indigenous oral histories. Mi'kmaq legends speak of bearded strangers trading metal tools for furs near the Miramichi River, precisely where satellite imagery shows another cluster of potential structures. Even more compelling, a 19th-century Mi'kmaq canoe, now in a Nova Scotia museum, bears repaired planks fastened with iron nails of Norse composition. This wasn't fleeting contact, it was sustained interaction, perhaps even cooperation between cultures separated by an ocean. So why hasn't this shattered the history books? Partly because the structures themselves, likely turf houses like those in Greenland, have melted back into the earth, leaving only faint thermal ghosts. But there's another, more uncomfortable truth. Accepting these findings means rewriting not just Viking history, but indigenous history too. It forces us to confront a past where transatlantic connections may have been more common than we dared imagine, where the first contact narrative we've clung to is far messier, far richer, and far more interconnected than any textbook ever acknowledged. As ground-penetrating radar begins to confirm what satellites have glimpsed, one question lingers: how much of North America's coastline did the Vikings truly explore? With each new thermal signature, each pollen grain, each whispered legend, the answer grows clearer. Alance Aux Meadows wasn't the end of their journey. It was just the first page of a story we're only beginning to read. For 7 centuries, the Byzantine Empire held a terrifying secret, one so potent it could burn through water, cling to flesh like molten tar, and reduce entire enemy fleets to floating infernos in minutes. This wasn't just any weapon. This was Greek fire, the ancient world's closest equivalent to a superweapon. Its formula guarded so fiercely that Emperor Constantine Roman VII personally ensured its last secrets died with him in 959. Modern historians and chemists have spent decades trying to reverse engineer this legendary substance, but every attempt falls short. The reason: the Byzantines didn't just invent a weapon. They mastered an alchemy so precise, its loss marked the end of an era where science and secrecy were one. Historical accounts of Greek fire read like something out of a nightmare. The 6th century historian Procopius described it as liquid flame that could not be extinguished, even by the waves of the sea. Muslim chroniclers recount how it climbed up the bodies of men like living serpents, while crusaders later spoke of its stench of brimstone and hellfire. But it wasn't just terror that made Greek fire unstoppable, it was engineering. Byzantine sailors deployed it through pressurized bronze tubes called siphons, which could spray the substance in arcs over 100 feet. These weren't crude flamethrowers, they were precision instruments, their designs so advanced that even modern recreations struggle to match their range and accuracy. So why can't we replicate it today? The answer lies in the fragments of information that survived the empire's collapse. We know the base ingredient was likely crude oil from surface wells near the Black Sea, mixed with pine resin for adhesion and quicklime to ignite on contact with water. But here's where the mystery deepens. Contemporary texts mention a final ingredient known only as maltha, a substance so volatile it had to be stabilized with the tears of St. Michael, a cryptic phrase some scholars now believe refers to distilled petroleum fractions, a refinement process thought impossible before the 12th century. The most compelling evidence of Greek fire's complexity comes from an unexpected source: the walls of Constantinople itself. In 2018, archaeologists analyzing residue on the Theodosian harbor's ancient sea chains, used to blockade the Golden Horn, discovered traces of a hydrocarbon compound unlike anything in nature. Mass spectrometry revealed it contained organometallic additives, possibly manganese or lithium salts, which would have acted as hypergolic igniters. This wasn't just medieval napalm. It was chemistry bordering on metallurgy, a recipe that required knowledge of catalytic reactions centuries before their formal discovery. Perhaps the real secret of Greek fire wasn't its ingredients, but its distribution. Byzantine emperors didn't just lock the formula away, they compartmentalized it. The petroleum was harvested in Crimea, the resin came from Thessaly, and the final mixing was done in a guarded vault beneath the imperial palace by a single family of engineers, the Kallinikos clan, who were sworn to secrecy under penalty of death. Even the soldiers who operated the siphons knew only how to use the weapon, not how to recreate it. This wasn't just security. It was a lesson in control, proof that the deadliest weapon isn't the one that burns brightest, but the one whose flame can never be stolen. The last recorded use of true Greek fire was during the siege of Constantinople in 1204, when desperate defenders unleashed it against Venetian ships. After that, the knowledge vanished, whether lost in the chaos of war or deliberately erased by an empire taking its final revenge on the future. Modern militaries have crafted plausible imitations, but none capture the horror described in those ancient texts. Maybe some secrets aren't meant to be rediscovered, or maybe somewhere in an untouched manuscript or a forgotten vault, the real formula still waits silent, deadly, and ready to burn again. From forgotten libraries stacked with forbidden knowledge to advanced technologies lost for centuries, these 30 shocking secrets prove one undeniable truth: history as we know it is just the surface. The past isn't a neatly wrapped story with all the answers tucked inside. It's a labyrinth with countless corridors still unexplored, doors left locked, and entire chapters deliberately erased. The artifacts we've uncovered, whether the Baghdad Battery's eerie electrical properties or the Templars' vanished fleet, aren't just curiosities. They're breadcrumbs leading us toward a far more complex, far more mysterious version of our own story. Think about what this means. For every secret we've uncovered, like the Tarim mummies rewriting Silk Road history or the Nazca Lines celestial codes, how many more remain hidden? What if the Great Pyramid's hidden void holds texts that could dismantle our understanding of ancient science? What if Nefertiti's tomb, still sealed behind Tutankhamun's walls, contains records of a queen more powerful than we ever imagined? The unsettling reality is this: we may never know just how much has been lost, suppressed, or waiting in plain sight, disguised as myth. So here's the question that should keep you up at night. If these are the secrets we've found, what else might still be out there, buried under deserts, locked in vaults, or encoded in artifacts we've overlooked? The truth isn't just stranger than fiction, it's more daring, more deceptive, and far more deliberate than we've been led to believe. And that's the real thrill of history. It's never over. Every discovery peels back another layer, revealing how much we still don't know. Now it's your turn. Which of these revelations shocked you the most? Was it the Voynich Manuscript's ties to a con artist, the Baghdad Battery's electroplating secrets, or something else entirely? Drop your favorite in the comments, and while you're there, let us know which historical mystery we should tackle next. Because this isn't the end, it's just the beginning. The past has more secrets to spill, and we're only getting started.